Good morning and welcome to How to Properly Follow Up webinar with Coach Chris. My name is PJ. I am one of the hosts. Also with us this morning, Anastasia Clendaniel. She's the head of our training team, and we will be co-hosting, taking any questions that you have. We are recording this, so we will post it on our Learn site later on, hopefully today, if not for sure by the end of the week, so that you can have access to that. If you've ever been to a Coach Chris webinar, you know Coach Chris has over 30 years of experience in the sales field, 17 of that specifically in the HVAC world. What you may or may not have known, Coach Chris played football for the University of Illinois. So as we get ready for the bowl season, Coach Chris's claim to fame is he still has it. He may pull it out for us today. I don't know. A University of Illinois Peach Bowl jersey. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The Peach Bowl, the highlight of Coach Chris's college football career. So if you have any questions about Coach Chris's Peach Bowl experience or the webinar and following up, you can use the chat feature at the bottom. Anastasia and I will be monitoring that throughout the webinar. If we need to stop and interrupt Chris with a pertinent question, we can and will. Otherwise, we do have time at the end for questions and answers about following up with Coach Chris. So I think that's everything that we need to touch base on at this point. Oh, if you haven't already, looks like lots of you have, we do have a poll up about how do you follow up. If you haven't yet, if you'll go ahead and do that, we'll share those results here in a little bit. Anastasia, Coach Chris, anything I missed before we turn it over to you, Coach Chris?
No, I think you've embarrassed me enough.
All right, well, we will then turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you and welcome everyone to the webinar on how to properly follow up. Let's look at the agenda really quick and we'll talk about the agenda being what is the purpose of follow-up, and we'll talk a little bit more about ways to properly follow up, the consistency needed to follow up, what prevents you from following up, and then we'll finish it all out with some questions and answers. So real quick, I think we've got everybody that's voted and looks like the results are in. So we've got about 20% that say that they follow up daily. We've got 70% that do it weekly and actually 10% that do it monthly. So if you got a chance, or if you had a chance to do that, appreciate it. And it looks like most everybody was capable of participating. So all right, so why is that important? Well, let's get into this and let's find out. So what is, sorry, I'm trying to move my notes around here. All right, so let's get into this real quickly. So what's the purpose? Well, the purpose ultimately is to make the sale, right? And we all kind of know that. That's the end result, and we really want to get to that. But one of the things that's super important is while we're doing this, we have to do it to add value. When we add value to the customer, we're bringing more than just the sale. We're going to do more than just try and make this sale, but we want to really add value to them because most people are going to want some sort of value add. And when you do that, you differentiate yourself from your competition, right? So how do you add value? Well, make sure that you listen to what they're saying. And when you do that, you can hear the little things that they're interested in. You can hear if they're interested in college football. You can hear if they're interested in the local weather, whatever it is that they're interested in. Make a note of that and bring that when you go to do your follow-up, and don't just follow up, but add value to them by bringing something to the table. Number two, build trust. When you follow up, you can develop a stronger connection with that customer by being genuinely interested in them and what they are doing. People buy from who they know, like, and trust, right? We've all heard that before. And it can be kind of cliche, but it really does work. When you are working with them and you're adding value to them, you're building trust. So find that connection, find a way to make that work. Don't make it superficial. Don't make it weird. Find ways to actually connect with folks and build that trust. This is really a key one that most folks don't understand, or I guess don't really think about, is you get the chance to address some possible problems earlier. Now, How many times have you made a follow-up call and the customer says, oh, well, I was wondering about this and now I have to ask you because you're in front of me, right? And so you start asking they start asking you the right questions because you followed up with them. So you're addressing something that maybe you didn't even know was going to be a problem. And all of a sudden it's popping up. And so you get the chance to address that. Also, you get to answer these unanswered questions that maybe they had no idea that was sitting out there, or they talked to their neighbor, they talked to their family member, they talked to a friend and they said, oh, I meant to ask you about this. What do you guys do about this? Or how do you handle this? Or I really need financing now. I didn't think I did. Now I do, right? Some things happened. And so it puts them in a different position, but you're there at the ready to answer those new questions or to address possible problems that may have come up down the road before you're getting ready to close. And of course, we want to sell more, right? Studies have found that less and less deals are being made on the first call. And any of you in the HVAC or plumbing, electrical, you guys know this, right? Somebody wants to think about it. They need some time. They want to do some research. They have to do something, and you weren't able to address it right then and there. So you're not going to sell it on the first try. So you have to go back. Well, when you do that, what's happening is that these studies are finding that more and more time is needed and more follow-up is needed. And that's why it's critical. That's why we're even having this conversation today. So now we're going to do another poll. And that is, how often do you follow up? So if you would go ahead, take a second and fill it out. Number one, is it 1 time, 2 to 4 times, 5 to 9 times, or 10 plus times? And as you're thinking about that, or as you're putting in the answers, and I appreciate everybody's getting through this, there's a reason for this, right? There's a reason that we talk about the number of follow-ups. And appreciate everybody doing that. Last chance, last call. We've got 2 people that haven't voted yet, so we're just giving everybody a chance. All right. So here's what it looks like. Most folks do between 2 and 4 times. Few of you do 1 time, some of you 5 to 9 times, right? And that's great. Here's the reason why this is super important. 92% of sales pros give up after the 4th call, but 80% of prospects say no 4 times before they say yes. According to the study by Brevet, 80% of sales require an average of 5 follow-ups in order to close the deal. However, 44% of sales reps are closing or are only following up with a rep 1, or following up with your customer 1 time, right? And even in our study, as we're showing the results here, you've got 27% of you that have said, yeah, I only follow up 1 time. If you followed up once and you were able to get the sale, that's awesome. But most of the time, that's not happening. You got to keep following up. It's going to take you at least, according to the studies that have been done, at least 5 times. And I've heard as many as 12. So what are some ways that we can properly follow up? Some of the ways, and it's really straightforward, right? Phone calls, emails, even text messages. Now, there's social media, and you can even stop by the house, right? If you're in the neighborhood, you could stop by as well. But there are so many different options now. So what's the best way? What's the best one for the customer? Well, you have to ask, right? And the best thing to do is just go ahead and ask them flat out. When you do that, and this is the key, I think a lot of times we forget about this, create that plan when you're with the customer. Go ahead, sit down and say, okay, if you're not going to do this today, which I can respect, when's the best time to follow up with you? I normally follow up on Tuesday at 9:30 or Wednesday at 3. Which one works better for you? Go ahead and set it up while you're there. So make that plan to follow up. If you don't make that plan, what's going to happen? You're going to fail, right? So we've got to make that plan. So go ahead and plan that follow-up right now. Make it happen. Well, what are some tools that we can use to help us properly follow up? Now, PJ mentioned this earlier. I've been in the HVAC industry for over 17 years. It's actually be 18 this spring. And when I first started, we actually had pagers. And That's the way we got customer information sent to us. So they would send us the information on a pager. I would take it and I would write it down on this piece of paper. And then I would go ahead and I would write all this stuff, the customer name, address, phone number, where the lead came from. If it came from a technician, if it was a marketed lead, if it was a referral, all of that stuff would go on there. I'd also write a note in there about the equipment, maybe something significant that they said to me. I'd write the date down that I got it and any pertinent information that would help me to remember the house, the customer, anything along those lines. And when you do that, it just gives you a good frame of reference, right? So go ahead and jot all those notes down if you're using paper. Next would be a spreadsheet or a calendar. If you use a calendar, you should have a note in there about every single call that you go on. If you closed it, great. But if you didn't close it, you should put a little note, a little memo on your calendar that says, follow up with them on Tuesday at 3:30. Follow up with them on such and such a date. And so that it pulls up on your calendar and it sends you a reminder. And you may be in a meeting with somebody, right? Pop out of that meeting if you can and just address that. But put it down in a spreadsheet. That's another way for you to do it. It's another way for you to keep track of these things with a calendar. And when you do it with the calendar, make it a 5-minute event. Make it a 5 or a 10-minute event. It doesn't have to be very long, and you can have multiples on the same time, so they all pop up at the same time, right? The best tool out there is what's called a CRM, or a customer relationship manager. And this is something like Salesforce or HubSpot or something along those lines, where they actually are going to help you to contact that client and work with them. There are some tools out there, and Pricebook Plus is one of them. You have things that you can do in there, but it's not a true CRM. ServiceTitan is the same way. Some of these other softwares that are available, they're not necessarily CRMs. They have CRM-like qualities, but they're not CRMs. So be careful when you're doing that and don't rely completely on that, though they can be a great tool to help you out. But just so you know, we at Pricebook, that's not what we designed it for. It's not necessarily designed to be a CRM, though we built in some things to help out with that. Well, once you get all that stuff together, now you have to be accountable for it. And who's going to hold you accountable? Now, if you're lucky enough to have a sales manager, they should be holding you accountable. If not, some of you owners, Joey, I don't know what you do, but I know you're probably holding your guys accountable with meetings and that kind of stuff. And you should be, right? Please make sure that you're holding folks accountable for what they're doing and what's going on out there. And if you're not holding them accountable, then nobody's going to do the job. We may not like the word when it applies to us, but it is vital to your success. So make sure that you're taking advantage of it. We're going to look at how important it is here in a second, because if you're not being held accountable, then you're going to make mistakes. So what kind of mistakes do we make when we're trying to follow up? Well, first and foremost is you call, you text, you email, you say, I am just following up. When you type out those words, when you say those words, you are planning to fail. And that's really what happens, is you plan to fail, because when they see your name, when they see your phone number come up, when they see that email from you, they know you're following up. That's a given. So don't do that. So, hey, when you call, it's, hey, this is Chris with Chris's HVAC. I was looking at this article this morning and I was thinking about you because it reminded me of the conversation that we had, and you showed some interest in IAQ products. And here's an article that I found. I can go ahead and send that to you. And would that make sense at this point, right? Something that you can do to bring value to the table for them. Don't just follow up to follow up. Another thing that we make mistakes in is the number of touches. And we've already kind of touched on it, pun intended, with the survey that we did earlier, right? If you're only making one phone call, or if you're making one follow-up attempt and you're not reaching them, or you kind of giving up on them, you're really making the mistake by not doing them the justice of reaching out to them properly and following up with them, and you probably won't win the sale. In this business, I think EGIA did a study and found that It took as many as 12 touches in the HVAC industry to make a sale. So somewhere between 5 and 12 is probably the right number. But don't give up just because they said no, or they didn't even say no. They never said anything, maybe. So next, we're talking about the consistency. And this is really where it comes into play, right? We've got to be consistent with what we're doing. We're not being consistent, then we're failing. If you don't intend to follow up, then all you're doing is running calls and you're burning through leads. And as an owner, as a manager, I can tell you right now, it's the worst thing in the world to just watch people just burn through leads. If they're not doing the follow-up, nobody's doing the follow-up, then guess what? You're burning leads. That's all you're doing, because nobody's closing 100% at the table. Make sure that you're setting a date and a time. So again, with consistency, number one is intention. Make sure that you are being intentional. So when you're with the customer, set that intention, let them know, hey, if we're not going to close the deal today, let's set up time to make sure that we do this follow-up, and make sure that you're doing exactly what you said you would do, right? Under promise, over deliver. You say you're going to follow up at 9:30 on Tuesday, follow up at 9:30 on Tuesday. Don't call them at 9:55 or even 12:30, right? You've missed the boat. You've not done what you said you were going to do. Now, if you send them a text message and say, hey, I'm sorry, I can't make it at 9:30. I'm running late with this appointment. That's a different story. But do what you say you're going to do, make it intentional, and follow up. Next, know the frequency. When you're consistently doing follow-up, you have an idea of how frequent you should be following up. First and foremost, I would say, make sure that you are asking the customer. If you're not asking the customer, you're going to do too much or too little, and that can get you in trouble. You could lose the sale. I wish I knew what the magic formula was, but I don't. I have no clue. And I've done it for years, but I can tell you it is between 5 and 9 or 5 and 12. So, but the more I do it, the better I get at it, right? The more you know what to say and how to say it, and you're preventing some of those mistakes. But again, ask the question. If you don't know, ask the customer, what's the appropriate amount of time that I should follow up with you? Some people actually tell you, keep bugging me because I'm hard to get in touch with. Keep trying to call me every day, blah, blah, blah. They'll tell you. But too much or too little could be kind of a death nail. Just be careful with that. You want to be diligent, but you don't want to be overly aggressive with your follow-up. So what is it that prevents you from following up? Well, the biggest one is fear. We all have fallen victim to this, right? We all have been afraid to make the calls, the emails, the texts, right? Because we're fearful of being rejected. We're fearful of failure. We don't want to know that we lost. And so we don't follow up, right? And that's not good because that doesn't help us or our clients. They called you for a reason. You spoke with them, you walked them through the presentation, you've done everything that you're supposed to do. And now it's time for you to follow up. So follow up, do what you're asked to do. Next, maybe you don't know what to say. And this is huge. And I'm picking on Joey because I've seen Joey here before and I've actually talked with Joey, but Joey knows this, I'm sure, firsthand. If you don't know what to say, let's get you a script, right? Joey, you've probably worked with your guys and you've worked with other people around you to say, okay, if you don't know what to say, let's do some role playing. And managers and salespeople alike, if you're not role playing, this is one of the best things that you could role play on is how to follow up. Now, when you role play this, don't try and trip each other up, help each other out, right? Throw them a curve, but make sure it's a soft curve. Don't throw something at them that they can't answer or is difficult to answer. Give them an opportunity to come up with an answer and work together on it, right? So if you don't know what to say, ask one of your coaches, ask one of your sales managers, ask the boss. If you don't know, contact me. I can help you. I can give you some ideas and some scripts that we could come up with and give you some real practical things that you can use when you're doing some follow-up. Another thing is that we get this preconceived notion, or really we get into judging people. And that's what prevents us from following up. We get in our heads that people will not and cannot buy from us. So why do we follow up? And if you've ever seen the movie Up up in the air with George Clooney and Anna Kendrick. Anna Kendrick is going around and she's trying this newfangled way of firing people. And she goes to do her first firing of someone, and the woman threatens to go and jump off a bridge. And Anna gets so upset. She runs out of the building, and George Clooney follows her out. And Anna says to George, well, do you ever follow up with these people and see what happens to them? Or if they ever follow through on what they say they're going to do? And George looks at her and he goes, well, no, nothing good can come from that. And we get, I think, in our heads sometimes where we just think, gosh, nothing good can come from follow-up. That's not true. Everything good can come from follow-up. We just have to do it. Just get out there and make the calls, send the text, shoot the emails. Another thing that prevents us from following up is time. And quite frankly, if we're too busy to do follow-up, we're too busy. There was a time in my career where I was running 6 to 8 calls a day in the summer. And here in the city of Atlanta, that's really, really difficult unless they're on top of each other. And by on top of each other, I mean within about 5 miles. If they're further than that here in Atlanta, if anybody knows Atlanta, you know it takes at least 30 to 45 minutes to get anywhere. So running that many calls, I was burning through leads. I truly was burning through leads, and I wasn't doing the appropriate follow-up that I needed to. And I would tell you that if you're not doing that, if you're wasting your time, right? And you're not doing yourself or your customers a service, take the time. If you don't have the time, ask your lead coordinator or ask your boss, please, I've got to set aside X amount of time to do some follow-up. Managers, please allow your people to do follow-up, because if they're not doing follow-up, and don't expect them to do it at 8 o'clock at night, because they're not going to do it at 8 o'clock at night. Allow them to do follow-ups during the day. Allow them to do follow-ups during the regular work schedule, because they need that time to do that. Managers, make sure you're discussing this during your one-on-ones too. If you don't have one-to-ones, then start doing those as well. Make sure that you're doing that during your one-to-one meetings, and give them time to do the follow-up. Last thing that prevents us from doing follow-up, we just forget. And we are forgetful. And that's part of why I encourage people to put the information into a CRM, put it into a calendar, do something that's going to remind you to call people, to follow up with people, because if you don't, you will forget. And when I wrote things down, I wasn't always on top of it, but I will tell you that if you have reminders, it's going to help you, and will do nothing but help you. One of the cool things is if you have Pricebook Plus, one of the advantages you're going to see is we have the ability to put in things to set reminders and help you to understand where the leads are at. Now, it's not going to pop up on your schedule or anything like that. You're going to have to go and find the information. But the Pricebook, one of the things, or some of the things that we have, are actually right here. So when you set up a lead, it then adds the status. It automatically adds it for you. So immediately goes to qualifying. Then you can say whether you contacted the account or were unable to contact that account. And so when you do that, make sure that you are putting the information in there. It's just a tool to help you to understand where you're at and what's going on. Next, when you quoted it and you need to follow up, we've got a couple of opportunities for you to do that, right? Here we've got, when you actually send the quote to the customer, number one, if you notice here, it says they've received the quote. If you're not following up with people after you send the quote, especially if you're doing it outside of the time that you were there. So say you had to leave and go on to something else before you could actually put together the proposal for the customer. Some things need to be done or answered. You don't know if they've received the quote or not. Do yourself a favor. Follow up with them. Ask them if they received the quote. Now, we've kind of shorted you on this here at Pricebook, and we've only given you 3 opportunities to follow up. I would encourage you to do what you can, and maybe what we'll do is we'll change it. I'll get on PJ and see what we can do to get that changed. But really, you ought to be doing follow-ups. And if you put in here, it just takes a minute. Once you make that phone call, just pop in here, say it's the first, the second, the third, whatever you've done. But go ahead and put the information in there. Congrats. Now you've sold it. You can update that here as well. It will automatically update to sold once they sign the agreement and they sign off on everything and they make the choices, right? So you can do some other follow-up here. Install pending, Did they get it installed? When's it going to be installed? Make sure you change the dates and stuff, but also it's been installed. Now follow-up is pending. If you're not following up with your clients after the install is done, you're also doing them a disservice. Plus, here's the thing, you could probably win some new business, get a referral, ask for, how things went. Did they get everything that you promised them? Make sure that they're getting everything that they asked for, right? So install, follow-up pending, and then you can actually put in there that it's actually closed. Everything's been done on it. Also, you followed up, tell us what happened. So let's say it's postponed. They wanted to get it repaired as opposed to replaced. They've got budget issues. There's some other reason. You can put that information in here. And again, it's a way for you to track it. Again, it's a little like a CRM, but it's not a CRM. It's not going to remind you, hey, don't forget to go back and call so-and-so. Lastly, you can't win them all, but you can learn. And the cool thing about this is if you did lose it, what happened? Was it competition? And don't just use competition as how I lost everything because you didn't follow up properly. Use it as the real reason for losing it. If you lost a competition, they decided to repair it, budgetary issues, you couldn't contact them, whatever it is, make sure that you put that in there as well. And be honest with yourself. There's really no reason to put wrong information in here. You can learn from every failure or loss. 2 questions I used to always ask everybody and myself when I would leave a call. What did I do right? And what could I have done better? And we can always learn if we lose, if we fail at something, we can always learn. So there's a chance for you to get better and do better. Well, that is the webinar. And so if you need help with some of the follow-up tools like the spreadsheets, the CRMs, that kind of stuff, please reach out. Contact Coach Chris at Coach Chris Consulting. You can text Coach Chris to 321-421-5213 for my digital business card. You'll have all my contact information there. If you need to, you can also reach out on my cell phone, 404-944-2851. I also can help out with improving your sales meetings, setting agendas, questions, things of that nature, implementing effective one-on-ones, and how to create and develop cultures that you desire for your business. So now we'll just open it up to some questions. And PJ, if you want to come back and join us, we will take some questions.
Hey, so we did get a really good question from someone just a moment ago here, and they said, what is the best time to do follow-up calls? 4 to 5 hours later, or wait 24 hours? I thought that was a really great question.
Yeah, that's a really good question because again, are you establishing that when you're talking with the customer, right? One of the best things to do is if they say, hey, I just need to talk to so-and-so, great. Will you be able to do that today? Okay, would you mind if I called you at 6 o'clock tonight or 4:30 this afternoon, depending on what time you're there, right? But would it be appropriate for me to call this afternoon? And if so, establish a time. Don't forget, make sure that you're putting that time in there so that they know what to expect and when to expect you to call.
Chris, another question.
Mm-hmm.
Does my follow-up have to be about the equipment that I'm selling?
No, in fact, again, it's about building value and about building trust, right? So we want to talk about things that are important to them. You're going to get some follow-up about the equipment. You're going to get follow-up about what you're talking to them or selling, to them. You're going to get that. But it shouldn't be a follow-up about, hey, I heard you're going to the basketball game tonight. Maybe that's not appropriate, but bring value to the table, right? Bring value to them, build the trust, help them out. It just makes a whole lot more sense if you're doing it that way.
What's the best way? You talked several times about planning to follow up in the webinar, making that plan with the homeowner. What's the best way to set up a follow-up when you're with that customer?
So one of the things that I used to do is I used to tell people that I usually follow up every day at 3:30. And I did. I just started making that my priority was to follow up every day at 3:30. So what I would say is I follow up every day at 3:30. Would tomorrow at 3:30 be okay, or Thursday at 3:30? Which one works best for you? Well, I need mornings. Okay, well, I'll make time. Does 10 work for you, or 10:30? Right. And so you kind of know your schedule, you know, when you go in. And we used to always, let me put it this way, when I was with a couple of different companies, and they were larger companies, we'd run calls at either 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. That was our first call. And so I could know if I ran an 8 a.m. call, 9:30, 10 o'clock, I was probably done with that first call. So I would say 10, 10:30, I'm making follow-up calls. And so again, you know your schedule, you know the amount of time it takes you. If it takes 2 hours to run a call, that runs, you know, it takes 2 hours to run a call. There's nothing wrong with that. Just set that time aside and know that know where you have gaps in your schedule, and go ahead and make that your follow-up time. That's probably the best way to do it. Did I answer that question properly? I feel like I'm leaving something out.
No, I think that's fine. Again, I think to your point, it's planning, it's making that time, it's having those conversations with the homeowners. And as you said, it's having that conversation with your sales manager or owner to make sure you're having that time scheduled into your day to be able to do those follow-ups.
Let's go ahead and pull that off there. All right.
I'll also mention, just for those who attended the webinar today, we will have a special cheat sheet that we're going to send out with the recording that's going to have some of the high points of what we discussed today, and then some sort of additional tips and ideas included in there. So look out for that in your email when we send out the recorded version. One of the things that I wanted to mention as well, when I was in sales, one of the best tips that my sales manager mentioned is if you don't know what to say when you're following up, maybe it's because you didn't listen to the customer enough, or you didn't pay attention to what they were saying. And if you do a good job when you're there listening and paying attention to what's important to that, and you're doing enough listening and not too much talking, then you'll have lots of material when you go to follow up with the customer. You'll know what to share with them and what to say, because you'll have an idea of who they actually are. So that's something to think about if you're trying to do those follow-ups, but you don't know what to say, which was one of my biggest struggles, is make sure when you're there, you're listening enough and you know what's important to them.
Great point. That's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up.
One of the other things sorry.
No, go ahead.
One of the other things you mentioned, Chris, was reviewing your misses, or saying you can't win them all, but you can learn from the ones that you don't get. I think that's a really good point, as there's always something to learn and plan for next time. Like if there was something that you didn't do, and I would say, don't be shy to ask. If you miss it and they say, hey, we ended up buying from someone else, all you can take from that is something to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So you may want to just ask them, was there anything I could have done differently? I'm learning, or I'm trying to improve my sales. Don't be shy to just ask the customer.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, I know people who have won deals back because they asked that question, because they said, hey, what did we do? What could we have done differently? And what could we have done that may have helped you to decide to go with us versus the other company? Was there something that we missed? And if they're honest and they tell you, maybe it's just something you forgot to mention, right? I mean, how often do we forget to mention something, and then it's like, well, yeah, they were going to give me a 10-year parts and labor warranty. And you're like, I give 10-year parts and labor on everything we do, or we do 12-year parts and labor, right? Whatever. But there's always opportunity to learn, right? And so it's not necessarily a chance to go back and try and win it, but it's an opportunity for you to learn and say, I appreciate the feedback.